Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for attending our lecture today, inshallah. It's a topic that is very important in our society today. Inshallah, for reason of barakah, we'll start with the Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا ماكثين فيه أبدا وينذر الذين قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا ما لهم به من علم ولا لآبائهم كبرت كلمة تخرج من أفواههم إن يقولون إلا كذبا فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا إنا جعلنا ما على الأرض زينة لها لنبلوهم أيهم أحسن عملا وإنا لجاعلون ما عليها صعيدا جرزا. Inshallah, as you all know, we are here for a topic which, like I mentioned, is extremely important in today's society. That is homeschooling. As a quick introduction, inshallah, we as parents, as older siblings, as carers of our next generation and our leaders of tomorrow have multiple choices with regards to how to educate them. And education is a necessary fundamental principle and part of growing up and developing in today's society, and a necessary part of flourishing in today's society. So we're faced with a number of options. Do we send them to a public school? What ages do we send them to a public school? Do we keep them at home for their entire life? What if we don't have experience? What if we don't have a good network around us? Do we decide to send them to an Islamic school? What are the different types of Islamic schools? What are state-run schools, and so on and so forth? There's a number of things that must be taken into consideration by a responsible parent, not a parent who wants their child to become like any go Harry on the road, wants to preserve their child's Islamic identity. Inshallah, we have a number of speakers, inshallah, with experience in a number of fields to shed some light, inshallah, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on these questions, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So a quick schedule for tonight, inshallah. We begin with the Quran, with the Hamd. We ask Allah to barakah into this gathering and make our gathering fully for His sake. Inshallah, we have 4 speakers with us. We have on my right, Sheikh Abu Anas, who is a local imam in Charlotte area, a personal teacher. He is a home educator of multiple children, Allahumma barik. And his own son, inshallah, is also one of the contributors, inshallah. And he is trustworthy for knowledge, Islamic knowledge, and also has years of experience with regards to homeschooling, and has insight into the benefits of state schools in regards to and in comparison to homeschooling. Our second contributor is Anas, who is not currently in your field of view. Inshallah, he is a personal friend also, and he has himself been homeschooled in this country. On my left, we have Faisal Ali, who has 20 years of experience with homeschooling the future generations. He is one of the founders or co-founders, if I'm not mistaken, of organizations in regards to supporting schools, and he has also got experience with regards to supporting the generation that's coming forward, inshallah. On my right, we have Usman, also a personal teacher. He's got 15 years of experience with regards to education. He himself is a teacher, and he has also experience, which is very valuable for many of us sitting here, with regards to Islamic schools. So any questions that we have in regards to that, can be posed towards Usman, inshallah. He's also got experience internationally with the teaching, inshallah. So without further ado, I will pass on to our Sheikh Abu Anas to start us off, inshallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina Rasulillah. The brother, mashallah, started with the beginning of Surah Al-Kahf. Yeah. Right. The brother started with the beginning of Surah Al-Kahf. And the beginning of Surah Al-Kahf, subhanAllah, is like a summary or introduction of Surah Al-Kahf, which is a long surah. And in the beginning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a few points or like things that will come later in the surah. But 2 of them are knowledge, al-ilm, ma lahum bihi min ilmin wa la li abaihim. So the importance of ilm, no one can speak without knowledge. No one can contribute to anything or bring idea without knowledge. Because later in the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ma ashhadtum khalqa as-samawati wal ardi wa la, and other things we see on the story of Musa alayhi salam. And the other thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here, إِنَّا لَجَعَلُونَ مَعَ الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا لِنَبْلُوهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. So we are here on this earth to be tested. And whatever responsibility Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, this is part of the test. So when we talk about home education or raising up children, this is a test. We have to take it as a responsibility that's given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not something light, it's a very serious issue. And if we don't do well, if we don't do the maximum we can do in this life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold us accountable, regardless of the result, because the result can be good or bad. But Allah Azza wa Jalla will hold us accountable for our actions. If we do what we have to do in this life, we'll pass. If we don't do what we have to do, we'll be in trouble. So at the beginning, mashallah, brother recited this, just reminded me of this one. Second, inshallah, we'll keep it short. He said 15 minutes, and we want to have more room for questions and discussions after that. As the brother said, alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me with 5 children, and all of which are homeschooled until they finished the GCSE. So Anas was in reception year 1 and year 2 in the beginning, and Islamic school. And after that he left, and since that year, I can't remember how many years, 9, 10 years. Since then, they all have been home educated. And until he finished his GCSE, then he went to the sixth form to do the A-levels. And this is the plan for all the children. So I would like to say in the beginning that home education is not a task. It's not something that you can do with other tasks in life. It's a lifestyle. It is like, I know it's different, so don't take me wrong. It's like someone coming to Islam. So when you come to Islam, it's not just you add a few prayers here and there. Your entire life changes. So you will have different lifestyle. So you will speak differently, you have different friends, you go to different places, you socialize in a different way. You spend your time differently, you will have different job maybe, you will need to move home, mashallah. A few brothers here have to come from France for similar purpose. So you change your life for this. So home education is something like that. And the thing is that when we come to home education, when people come to that one, they have to be willing for this. And they need to understand that home education is going to change their lives. And the lifestyle is going to be different. And they will have to make a lot of sacrifices. Maybe the life standard will go down, maybe if needed. The job is going to change, the income is going to be different. Sometimes even the entire job has to be different. Maybe that job is not suitable to them. People who run their own business, maybe they'll have to cut down their activities, or people who are employed, maybe they need to change to part-time or to start their own business or work from home. So many things will have to change in order to do it properly, because at the same time, we know that we don't want to take them from a place of risk, but don't give them their right as well. Because not giving the children the proper education or the good upbringing is considered to be abuse. So we don't want to do that at the same time. We don't want to take them from a place that we consider to be not very good for their upbringing, but at the same time, we don't do our responsibility towards them. And also we need to say that the home education is a contribution from both parents. So the mother will take the major responsibility, but has to be supported by the father as well, particularly during the first year, the primary age. So most of the work and most of the activities are run by sisters, by mothers. Whether that is in Muslim community or non-Muslim communities, this is the same case. And yeah. And I'll go quickly, inshallah, to then inshallah leave room for questions after this. Some benefits or the benefits I think are obvious, but they talk about the negative of it, or the struggle in this. One of the main things is the change in life, because not everyone actually feels very comfortable to stop socializing with certain people, stop doing certain things. Some brothers, mashallah, they like to spend time in coffee shops or with friends. They have to cut that down, even stop it completely. Some sisters are on social media, they need to forget about that, and so on. So not everyone feels comfortable for this. So this can be a challenge. Also financially, because the state schools are all free. But when you come to home education, you'll have to fund everything. And also not only funding, because financially, yes, it can be an issue, because you need to pay for private teachers, for resources, to hire plays, and to do other activities, sports, and so on and so forth. But also it needs an effort. Because in the school, in any school, you have a head teacher, you have teachers, you have whatever leader, this and this, and you have caretaker, you have cleaner, you have all of these people. But at home, the parents become everything. You become the cleaner and the head teacher and the teacher and everything, and the admin and the office and reception and the call center. You become everything. So it's a big, it's 24/7 responsibility basically. And so in terms of organizing classes, in terms of assessments, in terms of preparing for exams, all of that has to be done primarily by the parents. And the parents will have to work together. Another thing, maybe related to the first issue, is about change, that not everyone is very sociable as well. But for home education to be successful, you have to be very sociable, because it depends a lot about your contacts and your friends, and especially with the mothers. So you have to have good network of sisters around you, so you can do it together. So if you do home education as a family, by the way, that home education, for those who are not in this field, home education doesn't mean school inside the home. It doesn't mean that at all. Home education means that education is led by home. So they get educated outside and inside, and they interact with so many people, but it is led by home rather than led by someone else outside. So it depends primarily on the social network with other sisters and other home educators. So you can support one another. That's one thing. So one will take lead in organizing certain classes. One will take lead in organizing trips. One will take lead in maybe organizing sports. So some people have to take the initiative. They do teach the mothers, so they teach the children, and they take turns in that. Also, they share the cost. So when there is a cost that they share between each other, they share experience. But something very important, extremely important, this is the children have to have social life as well. They need to have friends and classmates and people that. And the good thing is here that you can choose your friends, or the children can choose, or the parents. You put them in with the children that you think they are good for them, or they are suitable for them, for their age, for their behavior, for they have similar background maybe. So that social network is very important. So the children are not isolated, and they are not interacting with other children. So we're talking about the negatives. Actually, we spoke about the need to change. We spoke about the finance, and also there's some very important point is that some parents were not educated in this country, or their English is not very good as well. So they struggle with this. They don't understand the system. So even when they are at school, they don't understand what's going on, what year, what exam. They don't know what that is. And they think that by going to home education, that everything will just collapse because they have no idea. So this is not primarily true because, as I said, if you have social network, they always support each other. But maybe if there are questions later, we'll speak about that. Another downside of it is dealing with the local educational authority. It's not a negative thing, it's actually a positive thing. You don't get inspections by the local education authority, you get visits. So they call it visits, and they are actually visits, they're not inspections. So people consider it to be like a burden, but actually it's not, because particularly for those who started, when you get like visits from the local education authority, they tell you that you're on the right track. And they do help and give advices, and they tell you the points, what you need to focus on, literacy, numeracy, and other issues. And they give you a report. The visits normally once a year. Normally get a visit once a year. If you request or they find an issue, they can do it twice a year. If there are issues, then they can have more visits. But normally it's either once a year or twice a year for some time. I think this is what I want to say in the beginning, and inshallah later if people have questions, then we'll have more chance inshallah to discuss these questions and talk about certain topics that people ask about.
In regards to the Q&A, inshallah, we can do it all together. So if you could remember your question, inshallah, for each speaker, keep them written down or maybe on your phone or memorize them, and at the end we'll have a question and answer for everyone, inshallah. So now, on to Faisal Ali, who, as I mentioned, has experience in regards to educating, including all years to the end of, including up to 6 years, inshallah. So he is the man to go to in regards to the questions, or specifically GCSEs and A-levels, inshallah.
Very much. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and thank you very much for inviting us for this event. I just to say a little background really. I mean, my experience is not necessarily homeschooling, but the trust that I'm CEO of, we have been in existence for the last 18 years, have worked with homeschooling movement here in the UK, in America. And as you know, homeschooling movement is quite big in America. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf and others, they play a big role in that movement. And as a trust, we have been working in Turkey, in Qatar, and a few other countries as well. But my main experience has been in the state sector, and I work with the City of London Academies Trust, which is one of the top leading trusts in the country. you know, the Square Mile. I don't know if you know the Square Mile. Yeah. Where the head office of all the central banks are, all the banks in the world. Yeah. So they have a trust, and so I was a founding member of one of the flagship schools in the country. So the first school that was established, which was a failing school by the DFE, was called Moscow Academy. Moscow Academy, and Michael Wilshire was the principal and became the Ofsted head of Ofsted. So they were our competitor in Hackney. And then our school was built just down the road. Formerly it was known as Homerton House Boys School. And then it became City Academy, London. And then those two schools became like almost the pioneers for the academic change to follow systems like line up, homeschool detentions, and so forth, and so forth. So they became like kind of the model for a lot of the academic chains. And so, but I did have some experience as a head teacher of a Muslim school as well, an Islamic school for a short period of time. It was a very interesting experience. My direct work, as I have said, is not with homeschooling, but what I can say is from the other side, when children who have been homeschooled, they come to the state school, you know, how they are. And I can say from my current school, I have seen a number of students, particularly from Somali background, who were homeschooled from an early age and then have come into state sector because, I don't know, maybe it was financially difficult, maybe circumstances changed for parents and so forth. And so they came back to the state sector. It was from year seven onwards. So you got some in year seven, some in maybe key stage 3. Key stage 3. Key stage 4, generally, people tend to keep them and do their GCSEs in tuition centers and so forth. Because by that time, they would have covered quite a large content of their curriculum. It would have been a disservice for that child to actually go into a school where they're in the middle of nowhere, essentially. So quite a lot of parents, they send, if they are unable to continue with homeschooling, they send their kids to the state sector when they're in key stage 3. Key stage 3, as you know, is from year 7 to year 9. Now, since COVID, there has been an increase, and I can say also, and I'm sure I don't know if there's one from your school, if you have noticed this as well, but I can say from our trust perspective, we've got 10 schools in our trust. From our trust perspective, we see that there are a large number of parents opting to do elective home education from all different backgrounds, However, I have to say that the provision of the elective home education is variable. Some parents are able to provide good quality home education, elective home education, because they are aware of what is expected and they understand the challenges, they understand what is required in order to ensure that their child, receives holistic education. But there are others, they do it more for, oh, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that. And it becomes quite an emotional reaction. And so they take them and then they take them for a short while, they don't know what to do, and then they put them back into the system again. And it creates a massive disturbance in the routine of that child and the way that they see education. You see? So I think whatever decision that parents make, that decision will stick with that child for the rest of their life. Whether you go with the state, Islamic, or home education. And whatever experience of education that they get, that will continue to remain with them, and it will repeat it as a cycle for their children as well. So it is a very, 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 very rewarding decision, but at the same time, a highly risky decision as well. And so whatever decision that you make, you have to think very, very carefully of what you want to actually achieve. What is the outcome that you want to achieve? What kind of a child? I mean, we all have these ideals in our mind. I want my son, I want my daughter to do this, and to do this, and so on. But the question that we have to ask ourselves, do we know the processes to get there? Are we ourselves experienced enough to be able to do that? If we are not, then we have to step back and ask tough questions in terms of whether it is the right choice, whether it's the right thing to do. One thing that I would say is that, and there's a time, if you had asked me when we started Nida Trust 18 years ago, one of the reasons why we started Nida Trust was that we had Muslim children across this, across schools all around the country. But when you actually look at the number of teachers who are of those communities, it was very, very highly underrepresented. And one of the things that we worked on quite heavily is that how do we recruit? Awareness knows Nida Trust very well from the very beginning, really. How do we then recruit people of underrepresented communities to become teachers at that time, so that they can act as role models for those communities at that time? I can say for sure most people who have become head teachers, Muslim head teachers, I wouldn't say there's any Muslim head teachers, or maybe there's a small handful, who would not know Nida Trust in some way, because we've had interaction with them over the years, and we've supported them, coached them, and so on and so forth. And I'm talking about not only just Islamic schools, I'm talking about state schools as well. So there has been a growth in the number of teachers over the years who have been representing our communities in the state sector. And it has been very positive because they have been able to bring in a lot of things that actually represent the cultural and spiritual needs of those students as well. That was very, very positive. But however, there has been a lot of changes recently. And I have to say, the state that the British education system is at the moment, I would, if you are able to do it, I wouldn't have done it before. 18 years ago, I would have said no. But now, if you are able to do it, and you have the skills and the tools and the resources to home educate your child, personally, I would say go for it. If you have it, if you have the tool. If you don't have it, then I would say just hold on. Before, in about 20 years ago, I would have said, no, don't do it. Don't do it, because the landscape was changing. But the challenges now that the children are going through in state sector, and also in even in Islamic schools. When we say Islamic schools, we can talk about the Q&A more about Islamic schools. There's, a lot of the time, Islamic schools are Islamic schools by name, but ideologically, they are no different from the state schools. And the definition of the knowledge that they implement is not their fault, by the way. The structures doesn't allow them to develop a model that has been a part of our legacy for last 1400 years. You see? And so therefore, they have to actually develop a definition and a framework of education that actually fits into a liberal secularist model. And so it actually creates, in fact, sometimes the Islamic schools actually end up creating young people with a very dichotomous mindset. You might ask me why that is good. I mean, you see it. I mean, in Muslim countries, you see two nations in one country. You know, they live side by side, but their mentality is completely different. You know, likewise, a similar thing here as well. And if you look, and I can tell you a little bit more about the curriculum design and all the other things in the schools as well. But going back to the homeschooling there, as I have said, I mean, if you have the tools to do it, and if you can do it, if you have the skills to do it, if you have the networks to do it, you know, go for it. If you don't, then please refrain from it. Because those children, if they don't get the right environment, they will be scarred for the rest of their lives. Education is a matter of life and death, whether we like it or not. People don't realize this. You either create a life or you destroy a life. And it is so critical that we get the education right. We can take more questions in a Q&A. I'll leave it as that, inshallah. Islam.
Alhamdulillah wahdahu wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'dah. It's interesting that Abdul Rahim started with the Surah Al-Kahf, because one of the ayats at the end of the story is فَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. And some of the Mufassirin, when they talk about this ayah, they talk about how the reason why Allah saved the treasure of the orphans at the end of the surah, one of the reasons is that the father was pious. Now, both Sheikh Awanis and Faisal have touched upon really important points. But before I get a little bit further, can I just have a show of hands who actually is a homeschooler? I can see 3, 4, okay, 4 people. So I think, like most of us, we're on the fence whether it's something that we can do. And I think what I do is echo Faisal's sentiment, where it says the variance in education exists whether you're a homeschooler or whether you send your children to a school. For example, there's something called postcode variance. So what that means is that you could have a child who goes to school in an affluent area where they've got a lot of money for the schools, they've got a lot of facilities, their state schools are on par with private schools, and they do exceptionally well. And they do exceptionally well because of 2 main factors that the government talks about. One is social deprivation and economic deprivation. And economic deprivation is everyone understands that. It's about not having the same amount of money as your peers that live in a postcode down the road. But social deprivation is when they don't have that home environment that helps them succeed within school. From my experience, I don't know if Faisal agrees, that the social deprivation, that factor is far worse on a child's development than economic deprivation. I was quite fortunate that I worked in a country where they have one of the highest GDPs in the world. So there was no economic deprivation there. But the social deprivation was very real. So children were being raised by their nannies, by their drivers. So when it came to societal issues, they existed. Now, another thing to understand as well is that our understanding of education, like the Islamic understanding of education, is very different to a schooling or Western understanding of education. So when you go to schools, you've got 2 ways that we judge schools. One is called a progress measure. So what we do is that a child comes into secondary school in year 7 and they got a grade 3, 4, 5 in their SAPs. And then what the government predicts is when they leave the end of their schooling life, they should achieve these grades. And if they achieve these grades, then the secondary school gets a score of 0. So they made expected progress. If they achieve less than the grade that the government's predicted, then the school has a negative impact on their attainment. And likewise, if they do better than the target grade, then the schools had a positive impact on their education. So that's one way you judge schools. So if you're looking for a state school, you'll be like, oh, they've got a progress score of 1.6 or 0.3. That means they add value to my child when they go to second. The second way they judge schools is using Ofsted. Now, Ofsted, what they've recently done is said that we don't really want to look at progress measures. We want to look at the environment and how the experience of the child within the school. Now, academic achievement is important. There's no doubt about it. I'm in education myself, so Faisal is something that we're constantly tracking. But the part of education which is probably missing and why a lot of people homeschool is the values. The values in education. So when you go to school, your child will be educated by someone who doesn't necessarily share your values. And those values can range from the most common content on LGBTQ, all the way down to how they decide to spend their money or their free time. Values, very, very vast range of what it is. But the variance exists not only in schools, but also in homeschooling. And to be honest, I think homeschooling is probably not the best term. I think that the term that we should be using is community schooling. Because the child doesn't just stay at home. What happens is you build the entire community, and you know the oft-quoted idiom or phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. And this is what homeschooling is really about, or community schooling is really about. Because what you're going to decide to do is take your child out in an environment and create a whole new environment for them. You're going to try to control that environment. Now, Awareness mentioned that you have to be the cleaner, you have to be the head teacher, you have to be the deputy, you have to be X, Y, Z. You have to be the person that answers to the local authority when they come. Remember, in a school, everyone is paid to do those jobs. So if you're looking to do some sort of community schooling, are you willing to make that sacrifice? That's what it really comes down to. Are we willing to make the sacrifice when it comes to an economic sacrifice? Because you will have to take time off work. Are you willing to make a sacrifice of not visiting the coffee shops? So it's a social sacrifice. All of those factors are extremely important when it comes to the children growing up. Now, what we need to provide for our young children are two main things. One is you have to provide opportunities. So there's this author, his name is Matthew Said, he talks in his book. He talks about why he was a successful table tennis Commonwealth champion. And he says, the only reason I was successful is because of the road that I grew up on. And the fact that my parents bought me a pro table tennis table at home. And he explained it, he goes, so the postcode that I grew up meant that I went to a specific school. When I went to that specific school, the head of PE at that school was a table tennis fanatic. So I got into table tennis. And what happened is my parents saw this, so they bought me a table at home. So then I started competing with my brother. So I played table tennis at home, and I played table tennis in school. And then what happened, because he was a table tennis fanatic, the head of PE, there was a local table tennis club. So he went to the local table tennis club. They say on that street alone, there were 6 national champions in table tennis. So the reason why I'm highlighting this story is because he was given the opportunity, access to high-level coaching, all of these things. And at the same time, there was the instilling of determination that you continue to work hard and go through it. So, and the reason why I talk about this is such a big decision is because if I was to ask parents, what's the most valuable thing for you on this earth? After your own parents, you'd say, my children. Yeah. So it's a decision that if you're making this decision, like Abana said, it's a complete lifestyle change. One of the things Asim asked me to talk about was conditions in secondary schools, in state schools. Now they vary. You could go to a state school and your child has an excellent experience. They really do. They go there, they have lots of opportunities, they've got swimming pools inside the school, they take them on regular enrichment. And the kids that are going to that school, their parents are quite conscious about the upbringing for their children as well. But then you can send your child to a school where there's lots of social and economic deprivation, and they're interacting with children who don't really have interaction with their parents. I'll give you a classic example. One child that I used to teach, he goes, I go home, I close the curtains, the food is made for me, my mum goes to her second job, I turn on the PlayStation, and I play until about 3-4 in the morning, and I go to sleep, and I come back to school the next day. Now imagine that child interacting with your child, who maybe hasn't even got a mobile phone, has got restricted access to the internet, all the things that you put in place. Undoubtedly, that interaction is going to cause issues for you as parents. Yeah. But again, like I said, it could be the same thing if you're sending your child to a local scouting group. They could go to a local scouting group and bump into a child who has certain issues because of the way they've grown up, and then that comes onto your child as well. But the difference is it's slightly more controlled. You know that you can take to this scout session, you can take them to that physics tutor or to that maths tutor. So it's a lot more control that you have. But I think the benefit of having such a small gathering is that this can be more of a discussion rather than us lecturing everyone here. But I think the most important thing that I'll probably end upon is that if you are about to embark on this journey of homeschooling or community schooling, it will be a massive sacrifice. And I haven't been able to do that sacrifice yet. Both my children go to secondary school and a local Islamic school. But if you are about to embark on this journey, just remember you will be the caretaker, the cleaner, you will be the physics teacher, the chemistry teacher, you'll be the head teacher, the PE teacher, you'll be the school counsellor. And after you've done all that with your children, then you probably have to cancel in between yourself and your wife as well. Because, you know, you're constantly in each other's faces. It's natural, okay? So I think I'll stop there. And it'd probably be good to open up maybe for some discussion and get Anis's experience as well of being someone who's homeschooled. But like I said, it's variance. It's all the quality of education that you can provide.
Now to get the experience of someone who's been there and done it, inshallah. I would like to call our brother Anis, local famous brother, Mama Barak, come and share with us some of his experience with homeschooling.
As he mentioned, my name is Anas. I'm 18 years old, and I started my homeschooling journey. I think I was 8 years old. I just turned 8. It was in 2013, and I was in year 3. So I finished about half of year 3, and I was in an Islamic school. I can talk all day about my journey, what I did, what I used to do, how I went through it. But I thought I'd open up more for Q&A and discussion, as I don't just want to be talking, but rather I want more questions and answer your thoughts about my experience. But just like a quick brief run through. Initially, I was a bit reluctant or hesitant about getting into homeschooling. So I was, I'd say, not the happiest in school, but I was getting by. And one day my mom sat me down and asked me, what do you think about homeschooling? And from what I'd seen, I thought it was something like sitting at home all day and having no social life, seeing no one. And it wasn't very appealing at all to me. And then my mom suggested to me that I try it for 6 weeks. And after a while, I agreed. I said, okay, I'll try it. If I don't, then I'll go back to the school. And we actually agreed that with the school. We spoke to the school and said I'll attempt it for a while. And if not, then I'll return. And I believe my mother's inspiration was from her friend who was doing it at the time. So as soon as I started, my mother took me to a park somewhere in London, in Tower Hamlets. And I go there, and obviously I've got this image in my head that homeschooling, I'm just going to be sitting at home. And literally in the first week, we go to this park, and I see swarms of kids running around the park, and the mothers sitting down having picnics. And I wasn't sure what they were doing, and mom told me this is a homeschooling group. So I made some new friends. We stayed there the whole day. When I got home, my mom was asking me how I thought about it. And I said, "Is this homeschooling? If it is, then yeah, sure, I'd love to do it." And so that was the start. Obviously, when you're at a young age, it's mostly play. Really, until you start secondary, there's very small things that you do. So for a child, say who's in year 4, year 5, they go to primary school from 9 o'clock in the morning until 3. How many hours is that? That's 6 hours. But if you look at the actual time they spend learning effectively with actually absorbing information is very minimal. And less than half of the time is actually spent learning properly. Most of it is the teacher trying to quiet down the children or letting them do some activities and so on. So the actual time I used to spend learning was during the day was maybe 2 or 3 hours. But then what do I do for the rest of the day? That's the question. So I used to be involved in many activities at Alhamdulillah. So the day was, as in throughout the week, every day I'd have a different group or sport or gathering I'd go to. For example, on a Monday I'd go horse riding, on a Tuesday I'd go to the park with some friends. On a Wednesday, I used to do ice skating. So every day came with a different experience. That's what I love. Because rather than going to the same place every single day to see the same kids, same teachers, and it's such a closed environment, very safe and kind of small and closed, that you don't get to meet different people. So people say that homeschooling you don't get a social life, but I see it the other way around. You get a better social life than kids in school. Because every day you see different people, you go different places, and you're forced to having to speak to new people and so on. This is all part of the nurturing and upbringing and building the character of their child. So to fast forward, that was most of my primary days, and the beginning of secondary as well. And then around year 8, year 9, that's when I started to think about GCSEs. So my parents were consulting people. Some advised them to take me to school, as it's too difficult to do GCSEs at home. But after weighing the benefits and disadvantages, we decided I'll continue my journey. So right now what children do in school is they do all their 8, 9, 10 subjects in 1 year, and it really builds up pressure on them, and it gets stressful. But what I did, and I think that used to be the system beforehand, many years ago, is that GCSEs used to be split over 2 or 3 years. So for example, in year 9, I did Arabic. Year 10, I did computer science, geography, and year 11, I did the rest of my core subjects. Alhamdulillah, got cancelled, so I don't see what it is, but alhamdulillah, I was on the right track. So obviously, at a younger age, I was involved in many activities, but as I was approaching my GCSEs, I had to start to reduce it a bit. And that's the advantage of homeschooling, is that you're in charge of your day, of your routine, what you want to do, what you want to get involved with. So when it came to the time where I had to sit down, focus, and work hard, then obviously I had to reduce some of the activities I was doing. So GCSEs, alhamdulillah, it was straightforward. And then when it came to A-levels, we knew a few people who had done them at home, but most people advised it's better to go to a sixth form, as A-levels require many hours of tutoring, and it's not easy because at a younger age, parents can easily pick up things from a textbook. It doesn't need much teaching and or specialist people in certain fields. So any parent can easily open a Key Stage 2 maths book and teach their child from it. It doesn't need anything. For example, geography, alhamdulillah, I didn't have a teacher for it, so just using textbooks and past papers. However, A-levels is slightly different. So I was advised to go to a sixth form. Alhamdulillah, when I applied to my sixth form, I had many of my close friends who applied to it, and we ended up in the same place. So we kind of kept our circle and stayed away from all the nonsense we hear these days about schools. So I did my 2 years in sixth form, finished my A levels, and did that. Started an apprenticeship, and now I live out of London. I only come here sometimes on the weekends. Alhamdulillah, I got married last month, and yes, so that's it pretty much. I just want to give like a brief overview, and then I'll open it all to questions.
Inshallah, I hope you've all been keeping your questions either written down or in your brains, inshallah, in your minds. Now to go into the QA, inshallah. So, if we could start on the right side of the brothers. Do you have any questions for any of the speakers?
Just what anybody has experience with go about creating Bulgaria or Chinese face we have. I personally come from West London, Uxbridge.
The question is in regards to networking and creating that village raising the child. Well, specifically comes from West London, so if you have any specific groups, inshallah. And I'll pass on to Usman.
I think Ron is probably the best person to ask about this.
Okay, Bismillah. First, for the first mistake, Ronnie, you.
The brown door.
Yeah, the door outside.
Yeah, close it, yeah.
He was saying that if 18 years ago he would advise against, now he'll say if you can do it. Come in. Yeah. I would say that actually it's home education is the first option 18 years ago and 100 years ago and now and in the future, and is always the best option. And state school is not an option 18 years ago and 20 years ago and today and in the future. So I consider that sending children to stateless school is like gambling with children. I can see the danger of this, and sincere advice to my brothers and sisters. I completely discourage anyone from sending their children to these high-risk places. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Did I say something wrong?
No.
The danger so we'll come to your question. So the danger in primary school is about the aqidah. Basically from young age, from reception until year 6. Well, it's about that. That's the corruption of the aqidah. And the main corruption of the aqidah today is atheism and secularism. Secularism in different forms. You have people who might be practicing Islam, but they unfortunately they've gone around with that secular state of mind. Why? Because secularism was in their bloodstream from young age. 6 years of putting secularism and atheism in their minds. It's like an atheism machine. They go here, innocent little children, they come from the other side, very different. Yes, we can say Sheikh so-and-so went through the system, this one through, so I went through the system, but I said this is high risk. It's very high risk. Very high risk. At secondary age, the danger is about the morals. So this is when the shahwat kick in, and all the desires are taken over, and then the risk comes from this point here. The safest place for a child is at home. I was saying that these people that are paid to do the jobs, they just do the jobs. The smiles, the care, that is just a job. No one cares. They don't do it. They're not actually passionate about it, even if they try to be or to look. passionate, but it's a job. They get paid. No one ever will replace the parents. No one ever. No woman on earth will do the job of the mother. And no one will look after the child like the father. No one. And the other point is, if you can do it and you have the tools to do it, alhamdulillah, let's be more practical. Today is, I would say, the only qualification you need is to realize the importance and to have the willingness to do it. That's the qualification that you need to do this. And the resources you need is the good environment. If you live somewhere in a village, remote village, you're not surrounded by Muslims, there is no masjid, you can't do it because no resources. The only resource is you just put yourself in the right environment. And the qualification you need, the skill, is to be willing to sacrifice and to give. Home education is not only about your brothers, mashallah, is very good terminology. It says community education rather than home education. The sacrifice is not only for the sake of your children, the sacrifice is for your children, other people's children as well around you, other people's children around you. So, as you are concerned that your child will do this or do that, you should be concerned about other people's children as well. And when you give, you need not only give time to your children, you might end up like helping a group that your children are not there. And you're helping this group because they are doing something that you are doing yourself as well. So it's about continuous giving and sacrifice. The brother asking about how to make the groups. The groups, alhamdulillah, they do exist. But the same thing, this is like the nature of anything. You know, any political party, social group, any club, what they need one person who's passionate and committed, and then people will gather around you. So if you cannot be this person, find this person. And as I say, alhamdulillah ta'ala, that's these people, and mashallah, maybe in London is more than any other city in the UK. And maybe the UK is one of the best maybe countries in Europe in this regard. In the USA is different because they've been very well established for a long time. Home education in this country now, I think, is in the golden age. Home education groups are almost everywhere in London. The activities are everywhere. The facilities, mashallah, are available. With regard to cost, you can change. If you are wealthy, you can do expensive activities. If you are not, you can give more like time and effort than money. You can manage. You can go do something expensive and something cheap. You can pick and choose. So the groups, back to the question, if the groups are there, try to find them. If the group is not there, then it needs someone to initiate it. The environment is very important, and even if you need to travel every single day, or once a week or twice a week to go to somewhere, if you say that you live here or you live in Brentwood, I don't think there's a group there. Maybe the nearest will be in Romford here. Then the parents have to make this sacrifice and go on. Or maybe at one point they will need to move home as well to be in that environment. Allah Ta'ala.
Just add on some other groups that you could possibly join. I'll just write them down. Firstly, I'll definitely get in touch with your local scout group. There probably will definitely be a Muslim scout group in your area. Muslim Scouts is quite big organisations across the UK. They have like an MSF as well. Another thing is sporting activities, as I was mentioning, just horse riding. You can probably find a local martial arts club, football club, cricket club, and the thing is you're not restricted with time as well. So you can go when times are quiet as well, which you probably get cheaper prices. And you've got stuff like set up from the UK like Lambda, which is a drama organisation. You can get kids involved in that. And you've got stuff like UK Maths Challenge. So your kids can get involved in the UK Maths Challenge and they can compete against other students and children. There's a plethora of STEM organisations. So if you go online and type in STEM, there's lots that you can get involved in. Also, the other stuff which is really important, like your local Quran class. I recently came back from a country and it was in Afghanistan, and what they do is the brothers that I was talking to, when the kid gets to year 4 and 5, they take them completely out of school, and that year is solely spent on just doing hifz. And he was talking about his son, and he goes, took about 9-10 months. He goes, his daughter did it in 7 months, inshallah. But just the concept of just taking a child out for a year and then making sure they focus on something which is beneficial to them. Age of 10, they've done their health. I mentioned martial arts clubs. Obviously, there's a lot more in East London. So if you wanted to move from west and across,
Muslim side.
yes, the Muslim side of London. There's also something else you can explore. This comes down to your local head teacher. There's something called flexi schooling. So what you can do, you can agree with the school. They can come in for certain subjects at certain times. Most head teachers decline this and they say no, because it's just too much of a headache for them. But if you get a community going, there's actually a school, I think it's in Suffolk, that's got about 25% of the students on the roll that are flexi schooling. So they go to school for about 3 days a week. That takes away costs of tuition, public examinations. But again, it depends if you've got local network that can go to the head teacher and say, we've got 25, 30 kids. We want to come to your school. We're going to add value. But are you willing to do this flexi schooling option? And there's no requirement from the local authority. But if you contact your local authority, sometimes they will pay for examinations as well. Unfortunately, Redbridge doesn't. But again, if you go with enough people, then there's a possibility that they'll pay for IGCSEs, stuff like that.
Okay. Is there any more questions from the brother side?
Yes, just like if ever do you have any experience with the foster child, we can do this homeschooling with the foster child as well?
In regards to foster children?
I'm from Redbridge area.
Yeah.
Redbridge Council.
Okay. The law is the child has to get adequate education that is adequate for their age and ability. And that's the law. If the child doesn't get the proper education that's suitable for their age and ability, this becomes child abuse. Then the authorities will force you to put them in the state's education school. I don't think it is different from whether it's fostering or your own child, because you have the same responsibility towards the child. But you need to check. Normally, when if you want to take your child for home education, you don't need to inform anyone. You just tell the school, and when you tell the school, you don't ask for permission. You inform them. You don't take their permission. You just inform the school. One line, say, from tomorrow my child is not coming. I'll home educate. You don't need to inform anyone, and they can't ask you questions. What they do, they are going to send that. They're going to refer you to the local education authority, and they tell them this child has gone because his parents will take him to home education. If a child hasn't been to school since birth, or your child has arrived from abroad, if you go to a GP or health visit or anywhere, they ask which school you go to, and you say home educated. Normally, they do inform the education authority as well. So they will call you. So you don't need to inform them. They will come to you, and they ask you to come for these visits. Let me just take a question again.
That's something special.
Yeah.
So when a child goes to fostering, they essentially become the legal guardian, become the local authority. You're not the legal guardian. You cannot make any judgment.
No, I know who's the legal guardian.
Yeah. So they what we call lax status. Okay, looked after the child. Yeah. And what happens is that that area is actually very, very technical. You have to be very careful, in terms of their rights and responsibilities. And then what happens is that they are then attached to what we call virtual school. Every local authority will have a virtual school. So they officially become the school that will aim to provide education for them. Okay? But that school is not a physical school. Yeah, it's not a physical school. It's an organization. So you go your social services that will take the care, and as part of that care provision, they put that child with you. Yeah, but you don't have any responsibility over it in terms of the education provision and things like Yeah, they don't. You will not.
Is the same case with adoption?
Adoption. This adoption is different.
Special
But when a
policy.
child becomes under the local authority care, the local authority will make decisions. And then what happens, even the school that they apply to and things like that, consultations and so forth,
They are.
they will do all of those things. However, you do have a say in the
Yeah.
process. And that say is you could say, look, you know what, I've got all this provision. You virtual school fund this, by the way, because they get extra money from it. Yeah. Because the lack students, so normally a funding for a student, depending on which area they're in, if they're in Tower Hamlets probably has got the highest funding ratio in the country. They get about £7,000 per child. And then in Redbridge, they don't get that. There's Redbridge around 5, just over 5. Whereas a lack student will get easily another £3,000 or £4,000 on top of what a normal student will get. And that extra money is used for tuition and one-to-one and so forth. The virtual school will provide all of that. You just have to be in conversation with them. And they can have tutors coming in to your house to do that. But they will have to do risk assessment and all of those things before they do those things. But it has got that area has got a lot of you need to read that one. There's a lot of legal issues concerned around it.
Most of I know about.
Yes.
Level of-
Okay. But also you have to be very careful as well in terms of, if you get this is with black students, you have to be very, very careful. Because sometimes, we foster Muslim kids. Yeah? And I think, so how do I know? So Muslim kid, we want to actually get them to pray and do all of those things and so forth. But you have no right to do that.
As a Muslim child, I have.
What you can do
Yeah.
is provide the environment for it, but you cannot preach to the child because that child is not yours. You see, and so what happens if that child turns around? Just to be aware of it. If that child turns around and says, "I don't want to do this," but they have made me to do that. You see, it just puts you in a very
That's right.
yeah.
There's one other area, it's called EHCP. If your child has an EHCP, it's like a special arrangement where they give it extra funding. Then you actually have to request from the local authority, I want to homeschool my child. They can refuse, but then if they refuse, you can then go to the government who will make a final judgment. But that's if they've got some SEN or something along those lines. But I think, as Foz was saying, it's really about the relationship that you have with the child. But it sounds like virtual school funding could actually make it slightly easier for foster children. Because you could say, this is the timetable, you fund it. You fund his horse riding, you fund his...
I have a question. Is there a lot of online classes available for homeschoolers?
The brother is asking about online classes. There are online classes, and you'll get to know all of this when you are in the network. So normally there are like WhatsApp groups. But the thing is, 99% of these are ladies, and they don't want men in the groups. So the mothers will have to be there, and we need to interact with these women to know about trips, about classes, events, gatherings, groups. So there are online classes. So my children, all of them are taught English by a teacher in Luton. So Anas, from beginning to the end, it's the same teacher. MashaAllah, he saw her online, but she never seen him. And all my children are taught by the same teacher. She's in Luton. Yeah, he was taught computer science by someone where? Hounslow, Exeter, yeah. So there are some online classes, yeah.
Anas, did you feel like there was the teaching, what you learned was more concentrated than going to a school? Do you feel like you picked up more life skills as well?
Definitely. So,
Give me the microphone.
So when I did attend classes, so I only attend all the lesson. I take my lesson, they give me my homework, and that's it. So the actual learning side, so say I'm doing English, I sit down for an hour and do English, and then after that I'm free to do anything else. So if on a Tuesday I'm doing English, maths, and science for an hour each, that's 3 hours. And once I finish the 3 hours, I can do anything else, and that way I was able to dedicate more time for the Quran. So I do around an hour and a half or 2 hours in the morning, and then another 2 hours and a half in the evening. And for someone who goes to school, it was almost impossible for them to do the morning Quran. They're just about be able to do the evening, but in the morning it could be too exhausting. But that way, I'm able to start my morning with Quran and finish my day with Quran as well. And in between, I had a lot of time to. So if I'm sitting down for English, I do English only, not talk to friends, get distracted by someone laughing, anything else. But it was more focused and to the point.
Let's do this first.
Jazakallah khair, Anas. We've got some questions from the sisters, inshallah.
You'll come back to you.
So I wanted to touch briefly on how to begin the process. So let's set an example. You've got 2 children, one in secondary school, one in primary school, and you decided that all of a sudden that you would take them both out of school and make this big sacrifice and go all dive into the deep end. What are the practical steps that you need to take in order to carry that out?
So I would like to say something, you guys, to add to what I said earlier. It is a huge responsibility. So anyone who's going to do this, you need to realize that you're responsible before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hugely. And if something is not done properly, then you better take the risk and send them wherever than just neglecting them. Second is how to start it, how to begin if you have children in different ages. And this is what I was saying, that because in Iraq, in those communities, so the communities have the children of different ages. So we have here 2 home education groups come to this place. And they have children from 0 to maybe 13 years old. The little ones, 1 year, 3 years, they're just running around. And then you'll have groups here. They split this whole into groups. So one of the mothers will be teaching age, say, like 7 to 9. I don't know how they split it, but 7 to 9, say, and then 10 to 12. And others will be teaching young other children and so on. So they'll split the whole into different groups. And they have different plans. Maybe the sisters can speak to the sister at the back who's in charge. So your children will be engaged with other children from different ages. But the parents will be like in charge of that at primary age. You will be teaching one of the groups as mother. You'll be teaching one of these groups. And then other ladies will be teaching other groups. Your child can be with you or can be with someone else. You don't necessarily teach your own child. It can be with you or with someone else. Because some parents, as we said earlier, maybe don't speak English properly, or they're not aware of anything that the children study, they're not aware of the curriculum. So what they do, maybe they take the admin, they keep the finance, they look after the young ones. So everyone does something, everyone has a role in it. Because as we need someone to teach, we need someone maybe to prepare the snacks, and we need someone to keep the little ones and put some toys for them. So everyone has a role to play in this. And I know that some groups, they insist that the mother has to stay there and has to do something. And if in any way that the mother, some groups are very strict in this. If the mother in any way can't do it, that she shouldn't send the children. Said, if you are sick, you're going to travel, you're going to Umrah or whatever, then don't send your children. Either you come with your children or don't come. Some groups are very strict about that. Why? Because they don't want other families to feel that you can just leave your children and go. So everyone has to be part of the process. This is in the beginning they do that. So you be part of this. Children will be in different groups, and then you continue at home as well. So they'll have books and they'll have homework and they have to do other things at home. There are activities throughout the week. Whether sport activities, scouts. By the way, scouts, for those who want to do that, if you go to MSF website, if you Google MSF Scout, and then you can enter your postcode and they will tell you where's the nearest Muslim group to you. So here you have 7th Good Maze, 8th Good Maze, and you have, I think it's called 3rd Shadow Heath here. So there will have maybe 3 or 4 Muslim scout groups around us here. So you go to MSF website and you just put this, mashallah, is a very good service. You put your postcode and they tell you. And if you want to start a group, because most of these groups, by the way, are fully, like, they don't have places. They have long waiting lists. At 7th Good Maze, you can't even get to the waiting list because the waiting list is too big. So you can start your own group. And scouting, by the way, is a very good platform for homeschoolers and for others. So you can start your own, and MSF will help. They give you all the resources and all the training and the guidance. They tell you how to do that.
I do agree with Brother Anas. I think as a Muslim community, we should benefit from the opportunities that the Education Act actually provides us here in this country. There is diversity of education, in terms of provision here in the UK. But unfortunately, we as a community, we are very behind in this taking up all these opportunities. As Brother Anas has actually mentioned, is that you have the right to take your child out of formal education and create your own education provision for them, in this country. And it's critical, I think, if Muslims can actually get together and formulate structures to be able to provide that environment, that option for those parents who want that option. However, it does not, although it does minimize or mitigate some of the risks, but it does not eradicate the risks and the challenges that your child will face, that the child will face at the same time in a state school. The reason being, there was a time you could have mitigated it, but your child could be exposed to the same ideas in their bedroom. The same ideas, same thoughts, same things that are happening outside, which a state school child is exposed to, your child is exposed to in the bedroom. Why? Because it's all there, it's on TikTok. It's there. That's it. So, as I have said, homeschooling provides, it reduces the risk, but it does not eradicate it. So this is why I think it's so critical that, mashallah, it's very important that parents who make the decision to home educate their children, that they understand the philosophical foundation of curriculum design and its outcome. If you have no idea about those things, then it will be tough. Just producing a child with a beard and a cap and a turban and a thong and so forth doesn't make you Muslim. We're seeing it now. Countries that try to do that, when they have now introduced these things, you'll find that one of their atheism is one of the highest in the country. Yeah, so so we have to be very, very careful about how we actually educate our children around this. So it's very important that parents understand the rationale behind those things before you actually make a decision about homeschooling. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's been waiting for a while, so take a question, inshallah.
Assalamualaikum. Jazakallah khairan to all the speakers for taking the time out today to talk to us about homeschooling. And a big Jazakallah khairan to Sheikh Abu Anas for enlightening us on his experiences as well on this process. I think sometimes it sounds like we're being encouraged and discouraged from homeschooling. It's a bit strange today, but I think obviously we should know the pitfalls of being a parent and how we should impart knowledge to our children as well, protect them from the influence from outside. But I think, I echo the Sheikh's comments in that homeschooling is the best outcome that you can think of for your children because it protects them. But ultimately, it's your responsibility as parents to protect your children from other things as well, whether it's mobile phones or internet or whatever. My question actually was for either Sheikh or his son. When you transferred back into the education system, you said up to A level you were homeschooling, and then during A levels you go back into sixth form or college. How did you find the transition back into the education system? In comparison to obviously being homeschooled, where you had the ability to focus, you weren't being distracted by other people in your class, etc.
In regards to someone who is homeschooled for a while and then they return back to the state school, and also how to protect your deen, what means should you take?
So I'd say when you reach the age of 16, 17, when the age of college or sixth form, you kind of already reached a point where your mentality and your lifestyle has already been set. Because people still do get influenced, they can still change, but their aqidah has already been developed, and their deen and their iman. So it's different than a child who's younger, who leaves school and then comes back when they're in year 7 or year 8. However, and I can't stress this enough, is friendship. So who you spend your time with. Because sixth form can make or break you. And it all depends on who you spend your time with, because you find all types of people there. You find people who can be your downfall, or you can find brothers who will inspire you and actually really motivate you. When I started sixth form, alhamdulillah, there were a few brothers around me, but I'd say the majority of the people, actually most of the students there were Muslim, but unfortunately the majority were not practicing. However, as a Muslim going into any environment you're in, your main priority should be you're not only going there to study and leave, but you want to leave a positive impression, and anywhere you go, your main priority should be dawah. So rather than trying to fit in or trying to appear like from the same crowd, because that's something a lot of people do. To fit in, they'll just copy what others are doing, and bit by bit, they'll just slowly drift away from their deen. However, you have to be very frank and to the point with your values and worship. So when it comes to the time of Salah, you say, I'm going to go and pray. Whether people come with you or not, even if you're the only one. So, for example, in the sixth form, there was no Jum'ah Salah, there was no congregational prayer, no one was doing anything about it. However, with a few of your friends, alhamdulillah, we managed to start up something. So, rather than, I'd say this is a benefit of homeschooling. It gives you that character building where you're able to step up and take initiative for things. So it really, really depends on who you spend your time with and sticking to your values that you were taught. And I'd say with distractions, at the beginning it was something that was a bit difficult. So because most of the time, I'd say half the time when you're in sixth form is spent doing self-study. So you sit in the library or in the study room and you self-study. And but in reality, people use that as a social time and not for study time, especially in the first year. So that was a big distraction. So what I used to do is just put headphones in and just drift away with everything else. Yeah. Is that fine?
Okay. Yeah. It's obviously a concern for a lot of parents in terms of moving their children back into the education systems. You know, how would you transition? Did you get any? Did your dad give you any advices or anything like that when you started off? And you're obviously about to embark on going back into a different environment.
So as I said, I started sixth form with a few of my friends, trusted friends who my dad knows personally. So that must have been a somewhat a relief for him. But I think it's better if he answers this question.
Yeah.
Before I answer the question, there's a question from my wife, so I can't speak.
There is no question.
No question.
I hold the answer of the question. Yes. Exactly.
Now, inshallah, the last question before we go on to our final part of this session for tonight, which is a question which concerns all of us as submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is specifically regarding the Quran, which is our main source of light in this life, and which is the primary reason why we're all sitting here today. So, inshallah, I would like to ask Shaykh Awanas, what role does the Quran have in the education of a child, whether he is homeschooled or not, inshallah?
I remember my father and my grandmother, because these were the main people who raised me up. They did a lot, and I learned a lot from them. But if I would pick one thing that they did to me is the memorization of the Quran. And I do remember the effort that they used to put in this, and the insistence from my father in particular, that I had no other option to do this. If it wasn't them, subhanAllah, I wouldn't have done this, and my life would be different, very different. So I think, subhanAllah, without the Quran, the life, what I would say, is different. And I remember when I was in primary school, because I was in Mecca, and I would say that the best children in the school are those who were going to health classes and those who memorized the Quran. They were like the top grade students, and primary and secondary school as well. So it opens the brain, and it stimulates the intelligence, and opens the thoughts, and puts everything in the right context. So of course, the Quran comes with understanding. It's not just memorizing words without meaning. The Quran has to come must be with understanding and reflection. So as parents, that when children learn the Quran, you should encourage them to ask questions up to their level, of course. Everyone's different. The level of language and the level of understanding. Maybe a child who's 7 years old is not going to understand like someone maybe 18. So the children need to ask questions. They need to understand the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They need to see the Quran is not a burden. It's something that they must do without meaning. They must see the Quran as a message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they memorize the Quran because this is the message of their Creator. And even brothers or sisters who go to Islamic knowledge, fiqh or hadith or something, I always say to my students that whatever you do, you will reach a point and you can't pass that. Even if you memorize all the books in the library, in the Islamic library, there is a limit, unless you memorize the Quran. Once you memorize the Quran, with little knowledge, you will excel. With little knowledge, you don't need to know much. With little knowledge, subhanAllah, you will see the difference. So when students come to me, someone memorized the Quran, someone didn't, you can see the difference from day one. The way they speak, the way they address issues, the way they learn, the way they answer questions is different. So whether people go to Islamic knowledge, they want to specialize in this, or any branch of knowledge. And by the way, their own knowledge is Islamic. Studying science or maths or engineering or medicine is all Islamic. I don't believe in this like secular education, Islamic education. Every ilm is Islamic. Whether you study medicine or study mathematics, it's all Islamic. Maybe it's one branch is the Sharia thing, is how to pray and how to fast and how to share the inheritance. And now the other one is how to do chemistry reactions and how to treat patients and how to build big towers. It's all knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when Allah Azza wa Jal speaks in the Quran about al-ilm, Allah doesn't speak about al-ilm, which is al-Arba'in Nawawi and the Madhab Abu Hanifa. Allah speaks about al-ilm, the ilm of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Allah speaks about ulama here, the ulama of science. And you go to that in Surah Fatir and read it, you'll understand it. In Surah Al-Jathiyah, same thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about ayatullah. Ayatullah mean not the verses of the Quran. Ayat mean how the rain comes and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates this and this. So children who learn Quran will be able to relate everything they learn to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Because al-ilm al-nafi' from the dua of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a, ilman nafi'a. Al-ilm al-nafi', the ilm that increases your knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jalla. So you know Allah more. That's it. Ilm غير نافع, the ilm that doesn't increase your knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to know something is not going to help you to know Allah more. This is useless knowledge. So any ilm that increases your knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ilm nafi'. So the child who memorizes the Quran and reads the stages of the creation of man in the womb, or reads how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala drives the clouds and how the rain falls, or how the trees grow and so on and so forth, or even the signs of the Day of Judgment, how the Day of Judgment happens, and can relate what they study in science and other branches of knowledge to the power and the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This happens through Al-Quran. So the child is learning one surah, they said, oh, this is what I studied in science, this is what I saw in the museum, this is what I read in the news, and they were related to that. And this is what's one of the things that are missing at schools, is to link the creation with the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala, just to make that link. So find people who go to, I always do this when I go to for hiking and mountain climbing, and people said, oh wow, amazing, that's beautiful. Okay, so just say subhanallah, that's beautiful, amazing, because Allah created the beautiful and amazing. So that link is missing. So the beautiful and amazing, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Yusuf, وَكَأَيٍّ مِّنْ آيَةٍ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ يَمُرُّونَ عَلَيْهَا وَهُمْ عَنْهَا مُعْرِضُونَ. There are many signs in the skies and the earth, they pass by while they are heedless of. They turn away from that. They don't make that link. So Al-Quran has a big role. So, and one of the things that here we talk about, actually, it was written here. When we talk about home education, you will have time for this, to focus on the Quran. And it has to be a priority. It has to be a priority and give more time to the Quran, not just memorizing words, meaningless words. Memorizing the Quran, understanding the Quran, and reflecting and implementing the Quran. And also to study the language of the Quran.
In regards to the language barrier.
Yeah?
Language barrier.
Of what? The Quran? Okay, language barrier, go to YouTube and type Tadabbur without Arabic or beyond Arabic by Sheikh Fadl Sulaiman. It's a course, and this is an amazing course. He's talking about how to do Tadabbur. Tadabbur means reflection, pondering without understanding Arabic. And he insists there that Arabic language, to be an Arab, is no necessity to reflect on the Quran. You don't have to be an Arab. Al Quran is not an Arabic course. Al Quran is not only for Arabs. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا كَافَّةً لِلنَّاسِ, to entire humanity. So go to that course because it's long one. You can say it in a few minutes.
Just repeat the name.
Fadl Sulaiman. His name is Fadl Sulaiman. And by the way, he and his team, they did a translation of Al Quran, and it is one of the best, or could be the best. It's called his organization called Bridges Foundation. You can download the app for free, or you can buy the book from Amazon. And it's the translation of Quran by Bridges Foundation. You can download it from Google Play or the iPhone one. And it's amazing. It's a very good translation of Quran. And you can watch that one about Tadabbur if you don't know Arabic. You don't have to wait until you finish your Arabic course and then understand Quran. It's like knowing the language, mashallah, is a good thing. But even if you don't know the language, you still can do that. But we are off the topic now.
I want to point out that's about making the connection of the creation of Allah to Allah. This is something I actually went through when I went sixth form. Is that alhamdulillah, me growing up, I was taught since a young age to make that connection all the time. So when studying science all the time, we used to link it back to Allah's mighty, His mercy, to His servants, and so on. But when I went to college, and we be studying things in physics that were phenomenal, just mind-blowing. I turn around and look at people's reactions, they're just normal. They're just normal facts for them, like it exists every day. And I was just shocked by that fact. I'd be like, we were studying particle physics and just things that are so tiny. And for example, ayats in the Quran that talk about things that were only discovered recently. And their reaction is just like this normal everyday knowledge. They just do not link it to Allah whatsoever. And if you think about it, since a young age, you've been taught Bali and John and Emma, of course, then they're not going that thought process of linking it to Allah is not going to be instilled in them. So I definitely saw this as a benefit. Alhamdulillah.
There are good questions here, but I think they are important. I'll be very quick, inshallah. First, then, why did you decide to stop at GCSE? I think Anas answered this because A-level is not easy to do from home for certain subjects, and also by that age, the child's personality is already established. What challenge did you experience in your first year? First year is difficult because if this is the line of education, it's the graph. The first year there is going to be a dip, so the children will be behind a bit in education. It's going to be a dip, but then you will pick up and go up. Why? Because you'll be discovering different things and doing things. But one of the good things about home education, you can catch up. So because what you miss in a few months, you can maybe catch up in a couple of weeks if you just put more effort. In school, it takes a long time because of the distractions and so on. What are the steps you need to? You said that. How do you know your child is on the right track? Is because you have a community. Every child is different, by the way, and this is maximum differentiation. Because what they do in the classrooms in schools, the teachers differentiate, but they can't do 100% differentiation. Otherwise, they will be forever there. But when you are looking after your children, that's maximum differentiation. So every child is different. But how do you know they're on the right track? Practical things. One is the community. Second is the visits from the local education authority. You will discuss with the person who comes to you and see the report. And third is, which is something really beneficial and good, is better, but some people don't have this, don't do that, to follow the national curriculum. I find it easier to follow the national curriculum, so you have something that's already set with regard to science and maths and English. So you get the books from the library or buy the normal books. But some parents do it in different ways. But this, I think, is safer and it's easier. And last thing also, what's the day from you wake up? The day is, every day is different again. Every day is different. It depends on the program of the children do. And it's less stressful, I would say, because in the school they have to wake up at the same time, at a certain time, they have to get ready and go and rush and this. With home education is different, and you are in control. So, because what most of the home educators aim to do is to eliminate stress. So there's no stress. They don't like children to be stressed at all. I know in the schools they say the opposite. They say that they want children to teach children how to work and live under stress, because they want to produce producers or consumers and producers at the same time. People who work for the system and consume the products of the system. Okay, this is another issue.
Jazakallah khair. I think we're going to wrap up there, inshallah. And I thank you all for attending. May Allah reward you all for your time. I know it's been a very long session, but alhamdulillah, hopefully a beneficial one, inshallah, from the experience of our guests. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep our children safe, to guide us all to the straight path.
I would request Brother Hassan, because I know that most of you, our brother and sister, will go home and will talk about it and think about it. I do request Brother Hassan to have this, inshallah, again, and maybe 2-3 times, as many as the brothers and sisters want. So we can keep the discussion going, and maybe other people will get involved as well in the discussion. And, excuse me, brother, one thing, wallahi, this scares me what? You know, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives something, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives what Allah gives for you to use it. So we are so blessed in this country. We have a lot of resources and a lot of opportunities in this country. To sit like that in Dubai or in Egypt or Saudi Arabia to criticize the government schooling and talk about education, we will all spend the night or maybe the next few weeks or months in prison. No doubt that this place will be closed, the police will be closing the road. This is how it is there. Seriously. And to have, alhamdulillah, that is the blessing from Allah Azza wa Jalla. And also to have these resources, and also the system here allows this to happen as well. So you are not forced to do whatever. So you have the option. We can make the choice. And another thing that adds to this, alhamdulillah, we are surrounded by wonderful families. Muslim families in this particular area here in East London. We're surrounded by a lot of Muslim families. The masajid here, maybe when I was in Egypt, I didn't have many masajid like here. If you go down this road, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 masajid, just walking distance. Go to the opposite, the same, like 5 masajid. Go this way, another 5 masajid. So we're talking about maybe about 10 masajid within walking distance around us. It's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But, and other things, not only this, many things that, but when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us that and we don't use it, then the scary thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take that away from us. And if we don't spread the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we don't sacrifice to protect our identity and identity for coming generations, the coming generation will curse us because we didn't make use of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So we need to keep the discussion going, and we need to work hard, and we need to stay united. And we need to remember that we are in this life for a test. And this is part of the test. Having children to raise them up is part of the test.
For those final comments. Inshallah, before we make our ways, inshallah, we have one final request from all of you, and that is that between yourselves, inshallah, you network and you talk to each other and you mix. And possibly one of the outcomes of that is that we can start a network in inshallah. Between the people who are attending here, inshallah. So, kind request for everyone to attend, who's attending, to mix a network and, inshallah, create bridge, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.